Welcome to the 14th episode of the series Decolonizing the Mind. I'm going to talk about the preparations for a regional war that's going on now. I'll begin today with Hezbollah. Tomorrow I'll discuss Iran, and the day after I'll discuss United States and Israel, and especially the question whether they might use nuclear bombs. For today, I will discuss three topics in this context. One is the meeting of yesterday of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and the Arab League. The Arab League is a cooperation between Arab nations, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation is a cooperation of Islamic states, meaning also Indonesia and Azerbaijan and what you have, which are not Arab nations. And then I'll discuss the second speech of Said Nasrallah, General Secretary of Hezbollah, and then I'll go in depth with an analysis of the interview of Sheikh Naim Qassam, the Deputy Secretary General of Hezbollah. Very important interview to understand how the regional war will be conducted and is being conducted. Now, yesterday, the Arab League and the OAC had a joint meeting. For the Arab League, this is, in the course of 70 years, the 62th meeting. There have been 62 Arab summits. 14 of them was labeled emergency summits, dealing with emergency matter, mostly of the Palestinians, but it never produced any practical results. Now there was a joint condemnation of Israel, of OIC and the Arab League, which is a positive thing. But interesting is the reports on the preparations of the ministers of foreign affairs, and the joint condemnation was prepared. Okay, that has been done, but what has not been accepted but prepared are the following issues: the banning of the use of American US military bases and other military bases in Arab countries that supply weapons and ammunition to Israel, the suspension of diplomatic, economic, security, and military relations with Israel by the Arab countries, the threatening of the use of the oil and economic power of the Arab countries to pressure Israel for a ceasefire, the prevent of the flight of Israeli civilian aircraft in the airspace of Arab countries, and the establishment of the Arab Committee at the ministerial level to immediately travel to New York, Washington, Brussels, Geneva, London, Paris, and request the leaders to stop the Zionist aggression. These are very concrete measures. You might think simple measures, not bombing, nothing, but it could exert an immense pressure, yet it was not accepted. And that tells you very much about the weakness of this organization. So what it did yesterday, it didn't condemn Hamas, and it put pressure on Israel, and that in itself, even it's weak, is a positive thing. Second important development of yesterday was the second speech of Said Hassan Nasrallah, the General Secretary of Hezbollah. And he laid down the strategic goal of Israel, he says, is not just revenge. It is the defeat, the strategic defeat of Hamas, Hezbollah, and all the resistance groups, and the final subjugation of all its enemies. And Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant threatened Hezbollah and threatened Lebanon. What we are doing in Gaza, he says, we will be able to do in Beirut as well, bombing Beirut to the Middle Age of the Stone Age. And the regional war is gradually expanding, and Hezbollah explains that there are two qualitative new steps that have been taken in this stage. One is that Hezbollah has used drones to do reconnaissance flights even into the middle of Israel and Haifa, and the use of Burkan missiles. And he explained that Burkan missiles have warheads of 300 to 500 kilo bombs, and they have been used now. He says that Israel is taking heavy losses in the north, and obviously you don't hear anything of this in the press. So he's preparing for the second stage, which is the expansion, which is gradually going on now, but might take a qualitative leap forward in the next weeks. And therefore, it is interesting to look at a speech, an interview that was given by the Deputy Secretary General of Hezbollah, Sheikh Naim Qassem, to Press TV. The reporter of Press TV, a very sharp lady, putting very sharp questions to the founding member. He's a founding member of Hezbollah. He gave the interview on November 7th, and he explains how the resistance operate. He says that they don't have, let's say, general meetings where they decide on all tactical operations. So each factions, they have regular meetings, bilateral, the several parties, but the attack of October 7 was even for them a big surprise. They didn't expect this. And he says this tells you that Hamas and the other Palestinian resistance groups are very professionals and very well trained. And Hezbollah was not bothered at all because they didn't get previous notification, because they understand the secret nature of the operation. And he says a victory of one group of the resistance is a victory for everybody. He said that operation of October 7 has a long-term strategic impact on the struggle for a free Palestine. He says because Israel doesn't have an internal structure to rely on its own. Without Western support, it would collapse in days and weeks. And yesterday, I explained in the video number 13 how Israel is supported with billions of dollars in the course of its existence, 150 or more billions, and now we're above the annual support they get from the US of 3.5 billion per year. Only for the operations in Gaza, they get 14 billion. A billion is 1,000 millions. So we're talking about a huge effect. And Qasim is right if he says that without that support, Israel might not exist even for a day or a week. Now he says we're going into a second phase after the attack of October 7. And that is deterring the aggression against civilians in Gaza. And he says, so they are conferring with Hamas, they are talking to Islamic Jihad and all the factions there to see what is the next step. It requires joint operations. And he says the next step for us is to alleviate the pressure on Palestine in the south of Lebanon, in the north of Israel. And we do that by attacking Israel in the north. And by saying to Israel, if you don't stop the bombing in Gaza, we will escalate the war in the north. But for now, we have a defensive approach. We don't escalate it on its own. Israel will escalate. So Hezbollah will operate initially from a defensive position, not to spread the battle, and he says, only for the sake of escalation. The goal of Israelis, the strategic goal is the destruction of Hamas. After they destroy Hamas, as I said earlier, the next target will be Hezbollah and the next target will be Iran. So for now, that goal is not reached at all. So they are not in a new stage yet. He says the enemy is communicating with us. They send us messages. Israel, USA is sending us messages directly and indirectly through Arab mediators. And the message is don't escalate. And our response is, instead of asking us not to intervene, ask Israel and the US to stop. Our intervention is a reaction to their action. So the intimidation that they get from the US doesn't work. It's clear in that. Now he's saying, after the war in 2006, where Hezbollah defeated Israel, there's been a huge increase in our capabilities. And what we use now is a minimum of capabilities. In the battle in the north of Israel, we use small capabilities. A wider war will use greater capabilities. And he says we have bombs and drones and missiles that could reach every place in Israel. And it can even hit the US aircraft carriers severely. So the journalists ask, are there red lines for escalation? If Israel does this, then it's all-out war. And he says, you need to understand the nature of Israeli aggression. It is expanding or just limited to revenge of October 7. And we know that they have a strategic goal, the defeat of Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran. But regarding our red lines, we don't declare our red lines. Based on intelligence of what the enemy is doing, that is where we decide step by step what we do. There may be other lines, orange, green lines, that define our next step. For now, it is preventing Israel from achieving its direct objective, which is destroying Hamas. He had other interesting things to say. In the Syrian war, there were differences between Hezbollah and Hamas. Hezbollah, was against Syria's government, and Hezbollah supported it. Hamas left Syria. They had their offices in Syria. Later they came back, so the rift was healed to some extent. And so the lady journalist asks Qassem, how do you deal with ideological differences? And here's the interesting thing that he says. He says we differentiate between ideological thought, beliefs, convictions, and actual performance of the resistance. We don't enforce anyone to be similar to us in our ideology, beliefs, and convictions. We don't judge others on whether they think like us or not. Any side has the freedom to believe as it wishes. Our common denominator is resistance. It means working together with Islamic group, Christian, secular organization, and communists. So he mentioned even communists. So what he's saying, look, we are not woke. We are not the type of movement that said what we think is what others should think also. This is our belief and you should submit to it. No, he said, we acknowledge that we have differences of opinion in beliefs, convictions, ideologies, but we have common grounds in the practice of resistance. Why don't we respect each other and say, believe what you believe? We might have discussions on it, we might exchange opinions on it, but that doesn't hinder us. The differences wouldn't hinder us in working together in the resistance, because our strategic goal is the same, which is the end of the occupation. The ultimate goal is the liberation of Palestine, and the actions required for it are not determined by ideological discussions, but practical cooperations. So practical resistance, we develop unity, not through ideological discussions. So the guy is very sharp. He's just saying, look, we could have ideological discussion till the end of the day and nothing happens. By acknowledging that you have the right to your ideology, I have the right to my ideology, we could have discussions on it, but we respect the differences. We don't try to convince each other about our ideology. What we need to do is to work together. And here's the thing, he says, our work is not centralized. It's not one central place that determines what everybody should do. There's not a formal alliance. It's not about formalities, it's about content. So sometimes we have bilateral relations, sometimes we have multilateral relations. It is possible to develop a movement like that, and tells you what the strength is of the liberation movement in Palestine. These people have been able to develop the mechanisms to ensure victory. If they were fighting all the time amongst each others, you know, if it was, then it was just divide and rule by the US and by Israel. That's not the case. They have found mechanisms to deal with diverse opinions in struggle. So they have been prepared militarily, politically, ideologically, organizationally for the expansion of the war to a regional war. And what will happen if Israel goes and bombs Beirut in order to expand and draw Hezbollah into a wider war in order to kill Hezbollah? A lot will depend on Iran. So let's look at how Iran is preparing for the regional war, politically, organizationally, and militarily. I'll deal with that tomorrow. Meanwhile, look at the index of the book on Hezbollah and Iran, and then you'll find the references and more extensive explanation. And if you want to look the PowerPoint, you can download it at my website, sandohira.com. And if you want to support the DTM channel, subscribe to it, share it with your friends and families and colleagues, and encourage them to subscribe. Get involved in discussion group, and if you are able to make a donation, look at the website sandohira.com, how to support us and how to make a donation. We are living in troublesome times, and in my view, in a turning point in world history, not just a regional history. And the next video on the preparation of a regional war with Iran goes further into this. Thank you, and hope to see you tomorrow.